Suddenly, without warning, a vast multitude of unprecedented and inexplicable incidents emerge, posing a dire threat to humanity. An unstoppable and imperceptible menace profoundly distorts human behavior, reminiscent of a plague that drives the infected to commit suicide. If you want to stay in the loop and receive more exciting videos, make sure to subscribe, click the notification bell, and don't forget to like the video. The film begins in New York City, specifically in Central Park, where strange and unsettling events start to unfold. People in the park begin to exhibit unusual behavior, such as repeating their words, standing motionless, and even walking backwards. A woman reading on a bench, named Allison Folland, removes a silver chopstick-style hairpin from her hair and tragically stabs herself in the neck with it. Simultaneously, at a nearby construction site, two workers named Curtis McLaren and Michael Den Decker are engaged in a conversation when suddenly a body falls from above. Filled with panic, assuming it was an accidental fall, they rush to the injured worker's side. While attending to the first fallen worker, another body unexpectedly thuds onto the ground. The situation becomes increasingly unbelievable as more workers continue to plummet from above, seemingly jumping of their own accord. The scene then shifts to a science teacher named Elliot Moore, portrayed by Mark Wahlberg, who is lecturing about the unexplained phenomenon of thousands of bees mysteriously disappearing without a trace. One of Elliot's students offers the theory that this is a natural event beyond complete comprehension. As the students engage in speculation, Elliot is abruptly summoned to a staff meeting due to an alleged terrorist attack involving the release of a gas in Central Park. The meeting informs the attendees that school has been canceled. While leaving the classroom, Elliot confides in his friend Julian, a math teacher played by John Leguizamo, about the marital difficulties he is facing with his wife. In an attempt to escape the unfolding chaos, Elliot and his wife Alma, portrayed by Zooey Deschanel, along with Julian and his daughter Jess, portrayed by Ashlyn Sanchez, flee Philadelphia via train. However, as they travel, they begin receiving cell phone reports indicating that the attacks have spread to their intended destination and many other locations. Alma's phone incessantly rings with calls from someone named Joey, and she chooses to conceal this from Elliot. The movie then transitions to Rittenhouse Park in Philadelphia, where a woman named Jan Ellis is walking her dog. A sudden gust of wind sweeps through the area. A traffic cop named Don Castro, navigating through a traffic jam, pauses and remarks to a taxi driver about the chilly weather. Suddenly, everyone freezes in place. A gunshot reverberates, and he collapses to the pavement. The taxi driver exits his vehicle, retrieves the gun lying next to the body, and tragically shoots himself in the forehead as well. Due to a loss of communication among the conductors, the train unintentionally leaves behind Elliot, Alma, Julian, Jess, and the other passengers in a charming rural town. While at a diner, they witness a news broadcast that reveals the recent suicides are not the result of a terrorist attack, but rather a natural occurrence. A reporter explains that a toxin has disabled the brain's self-preservation mechanism, leading individuals to harm themselves. Julian, who is unable to reach his wife visiting Princeton, becomes increasingly anxious. A woman shows Elliot a video on her iPhone similar to content found on YouTube. The video depicts a man intentionally provoking lions at a zoo, resulting in a horrifying scene where both his arms are devoured. In a state of desperation, Julian finds a ride with a group of people heading towards Princeton, leaving Jess with Elliot and Alma. Upon arriving in Princeton, Julian discovers that the town has also succumbed to the phenomenon, with numerous people hanging from trees along the road. Overwhelmed by despair, the driver purposefully crashes the car into a tree, and Julian ends his life by slashing his wrists with a shard of broken windshield glass. Meanwhile, Elliot, Alma, and the rest of the survivors decide to escape to the state border, as the attacks appear to be localized to the northeastern United States. A compassionate couple who run a plant nursery offer them a ride in their car. The man speculates that the toxin may be produced by plants, explaining how plants communicate and release chemicals to repel specific pests. While attempting to reach the state border, they come across lifeless bodies scattered along the road. Opting to turn back, they encounter numerous other vehicles, all converging at a junction on a country road. All the drivers report encountering bodies in the opposite direction. Led by an army private, they abandon their cars and proceed on foot toward a secluded housing development known only to a realtor named Joel de la Fuente. As they walk across the fields, they split into two groups. The smaller group, consisting of Elliot, Alma, and Jess, leads the way with around 10 to 12 people. Following behind by a 3 or 4 minute gap is the larger group of 20 to 25 people, which includes the soldier and the plant couple. Unfortunately, the larger group becomes infected, and the soldier becomes delusional, shouting about his identity as a soldier and his unwavering attachment to his gun. Gunshots ring out, indicating that one by one, they use the soldier's gun to take their own lives. Realizing that the plants might indeed be the source of the toxin and that it is triggered by large groups, Elliot becomes convinced of the need to split up. He urgently instructs everyone to divide into smaller groups, and the original group disperses into 3 different directions, all running away. During their escape, Alma takes the opportunity to share something with Elliot, confessing that on a night she claimed to be working late, she actually went out for tiramisu with a colleague named Joey, but that was the extent of their interaction. Eventually, Elliot, Alma, Jess, and 2 teenagers stumble upon a show home in the new development. A moment of comic relief arises as Elliot engages in a conversation with a plant he sees swaying inside the house, introducing himself and trying to establish a positive connection to avoid harm. To his surprise, he discovers that the plant is actually made of plastic. As they depart from the show home, they witness 2 small groups of people converging, forming a larger group of approximately 12 to 15 individuals. Causing confusion among the group, except for one man who starts a large commercial lawnmower and positions himself in front of it, leading to a gruesome demise. The 5 survivors eventually find themselves on the front porch of a boarded-up house, pleading for food. Meanwhile, Jess amuses herself on a rope swing hanging from a tree branch, creating an eerie atmosphere, although nothing significant happens. The inhabitants of the house refuse to provide food or shelter, leading to the 2 teenagers becoming aggressive, kicking the door and shouting at the people inside. In response, the inhabitants shoot and kill both teenagers, one through the chest and the other through the head, leaving Elliot in a state of shock. Elliot, Alma, and Jess continue their journey until they stumble upon an old, powerless house, which appears to be abandoned. They assume it is unoccupied until they encounter a mysterious elderly woman, Betty Buckley, who prefers to remain disconnected from the outside world. She refuses to acknowledge the events occurring outside but kindly offers them supper and a place to spend the night. The audience is presented with a news broadcast discussing the toxin. A scientist predicts that the attacks will reach their peak at 9 a.m. the following day and then rapidly decline until they cease entirely, accompanied by a graph showing a sharp decline in toxin activity. When Elliot wakes up in the morning, the eccentric old lady informs him, Alma, and Jess that they must leave, unaware of the news broadcast. As the old lady steps outside into the garden, she exhibits signs of being affected by the toxin. She walks backward, leading to bizarre behavior where she headbutts the walls and eventually shatters a window, causing glass fragments to embed in her face and eye. This allows the wind, along with the toxin, to enter the house. Panicked, Elliot frantically searches the house for Alma and Jess, hearing their voices but unable to locate them. He believes they are in the cellar but discovers that he is alone upon entering. In reality, Alma and Jess are outside in an old stone spring house, connected to the cellar through a speaking tube used during the pre-Civil War Underground Railroad era. Elliot communicates with them through this tube and shares his realization that the toxin now seems to be triggered even by a single individual's presence. Deciding that he doesn't want to face death alone, Elliot gathers Alma and Jess, and they leave their respective safe hiding places. They venture into the middle of the garden, holding hands, bracing themselves for what may come. The wind blows, but nothing happens. The ordeal has ended. 3 months later, they are back living in Philadelphia, where life appears to have returned to normalcy. Although the streets are relatively empty, cars drive around, and people walk on the sidewalks. Jess boards a school bus while Elliot and Alma await the results of a pregnancy test. The test turns out positive, and Elliot embraces Alma with joy. On the television, a scientist warns that the event resembled a red tide, indicating that the planet may be rejecting humans as pests. The host mentions the possibility of similar occurrences happening elsewhere. The scene transitions to the gardens at the Jardins du Louvre in Paris, France. 2 men are engaged in conversation about their plans for the evening after work. Suddenly, a distant scream interrupts their discussion. Everyone freezes in place, and the other man exclaims, "Oh my God," in French.